I think what makes this situation a little more tense for some folks is that we're revolving in this, all this money is going into creating a game off of a show that, focused on the darker side of capitalism. Hey everyone, how are you? I'm so excited to see you all. I hope you're doing well. Today I thought we would do something interesting. I have seen something floating around on YouTube, and I've been thinking on it, musing, if you will. And so since this is Musings by Maria, I thought I would bring it here and we could have a conversation about it. So if you guys don't know, MrBeast, he was a content creator here on YouTube, known for giving away money or having, I feel like he does a lot of competitions where prizes are given out at the end. I think recently he did whoever touches the Lamborghini last gets the Lamborghini or something like that. But he does, he's known for giving away money. But he has decided to host in real life Squid Games. And so he did that. And then he released the video on Wednesday, so 2 days ago. And I'm pretty sure it broke a whole bunch of records. I think right now it had like 75 million views the last time I checked. So a lot of people were excited to see this. They were really excited for him to do this. But on the flip side, I've also seen a lot of people who are not happy about it. And some are even calling. I've seen people calling for him to be canceled, for the Squid Games to be canceled that he's putting on. And so I just thought it was so interesting because cancel culture is kind of interesting to me. The false dichotomy that we have as a society right now is so intriguing. And so I thought, let's have a conversation about it. And I want to see what you guys think. So if you don't know, Squid Games is some show that's on Netflix. I think it aired, 2 months ago. But essentially, it is a series that revolves around one contestant out of 456 players, but specifically it focuses on one. And all of these players are there to play these games. So they thought they were going in to play these games, and at the end you could win, I think it's 45.6 billion won. So the catch is, each of the games are childlike games that you might have played in your childhood. But when you lose, you die. And the director was really trying to create something that depicts an extreme competition, somewhat like the extreme competition of life. And that director is Hwang Dong-hyuk. So essentially, Squid Games is an allegory about modern capitalism and our society and what that looks like. And the catch here is, and if you haven't seen it, scroll ahead, you find out at the end that it is what is represented as the rich elite who are just using this for their entertainment. And we've seen that in a lot of different stories throughout the ages, but this one is specifically that they're paying for, this entertainment and this wager to see who's going to win, and watching these people essentially fight for their lives. So it's very much about the exploitation of a society, and people who are destitute and are most vulnerable populations. So with that being said, let's go back to what MrBeast is doing. So essentially, what I have seen is that this can be broken down into two specific arguments. These are the most common ones that I have seen discussed online. The first one being that MrBeast wasted all of this money. That's what people are saying. He spent an egregious amount of money on it. It's $3.5 million, and all of that could have been given to charity. So I think it was like $2.1 million to build the sets, and then another million or so to give out as cash prizes. So that was the main argument that I saw. But then also, and I think this kind of goes into the second argument, is that he possibly missed the whole, not possibly, they're saying he did. He missed the point of what Squid Games is about, and is in turn being the rich elite and exploiting people. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. So, and get your thoughts on this, because like I said, it's so interesting how we have people on two completely different sides. So I want to talk about this charity piece first, and then we'll go down to him missing the point and possibly exploiting people. So what people are saying, instead of hosting this game, he should have given all of that money to charity. And what people are saying to counteract that argument is that MrBeast gives out money all the time. He has his own philanthropy foundation, I believe. He is planting like 20 million trees or something, and that he gives out money all the time. And so, he's actually a good person. And so I wanted to pause on that concept really quickly because I think it's interesting that we can say that because he gives money, he or she, it doesn't have to be him, because they donate, that makes them a good person. So essentially, affirming the consequence, or the consequent, if you will, if you're looking at, fallacies. And I just wanted to pause on that because I want to tell you, I know a lot of people who donate who have questionable other things that go on in their life. And so I wanted to look at that in terms of the actual Squid Games Netflix show. The people at the end are shown to us are represented as the rich elite, and they are there paying money for this entertainment. Those people could, because we don't ever see their faces, they're just like this abstract concept essentially, right? Because they're all wearing masks. They just seem like they're disgusting because, what they're doing, right? It's gross, right? They are exploiting people for their own gain. But what we don't see is what they do back in their lives when they are back home, because they have families, they have things that they're doing. So they could be giving to charity when they go home, right? They could be giving to lots of charity. They could have their own foundation where they're actually helping people and doing great things. So does that mean that we can excuse the fact that they're doing this, morally wrong thing over here? Or do we ignore that they're doing this really bad thing and just focus on the fact that, wow, but they give to charity? Yes, they might want to murder 456 million people, but they give to charity. So, that makes them a good person. I think that's an interesting concept to think on, because that's kind of what happens when we focus on this one specific piece of someone's whole entire life. One thing I don't believe makes up for everything else that you're doing. I think you have to look at a person as a whole and all of their accomplishments, and then you can make that decision. But then again, it's really dependent upon you and whether or not you think certain things are, outweigh other things. What is, morally gray versus what is black and white, and what can you live with and what can you not live with? So I wanted to make that point because that is a point that a lot of people are making. That's up to you to decide. I'm not saying he's doing morally wrong things all the time, right? I don't know him, or at all. But I just wanted to say, as a whole, as we look at society, I think it's interesting that we can just pinpoint one thing and then assume everything else that person does. Essentially, hero worship someone off of one thing. It kind of also goes into whether or not we think that the wealthy or the rich should give back more money, and how much of that money should we make them give back, which is really that conversation that we're having here. MrBeast is just representing what we're all in the throes of having conversations about in our society today, right? We're talking about taxing the rich. We're talking about whether or not the rich are pulling their weight, and how much should we demand that they give back, and what does that look like? How would that be implemented? And there's a lot of visceral reactions around that, right? Some people are like, that's their money and they can do what they want. Other people are demanding that they do better with it. Because MrBeast did not give away $3.5 million, $2.5 million of that did go to purchasing, materials for the sets and for making sure that he could pay people for, building things and crew. So it's not like he took that $3.5 million and kept it himself. He did actually use that and spent it on goods and services for other people in, our economy right now. And then he gave away the rest. So I think, you have to look at that side of it too. So that really is up to you to decide whether or not that is something that is important to you and where you fall on that spectrum with your own morals. I think what makes this situation a little more tense for some folks is that we're revolving in all this money is going into creating a game off of a show that focused on the darker side of capitalism with the exploitation of folks who are indebted or poor. And so taking that concept and building an in real life game around it that just focuses on the games and not necessarily that other piece, I think is what makes people pretty uncomfy when we talk about it, right? So that goes to the missing the point piece. So if you take a step back and you look at it, the whole premise, or one of the big pieces of the premise of Squid Games, is, right, exploiting people for the entertainment of the rich, right? And so when MrBeast was like, I'm gonna do this, people immediately looked to him, not everyone, but quite a few people immediately looked to it as him doing the same thing that they were doing in the game. Granted, this was just a game show without all of the other horrible pieces that Squid Games had in it, but people still looked at it as if he was taking advantage of something. And so when we're talking about that, I wanted to compare and contrast the differences between the two, right? So in Squid Games, people are invited based on the criteria that essentially they would give anything to win, right? And they're typically indebted. They are looking for a way out. You can see that by how they choose people in Squid Games, because it's like this game you play with them. If you win, right, you get money. But if the recruiter for the Squid Games wins, he gets to slap you in the face. And so people who are really either need the money, or folks who are just addicted to gambling and trying to win, will continue to play, as we saw in the movie or in the series, until they win. And that's the type of person that they're looking for specifically, because they're, in their eyes, easier to exploit. What MrBeast did, I believe, is you had a comment on his TikTok what your number would be, or you had to buy one of his merchandise, right? So typically that means that the people who are going to be on MrBeast Squid Games are fans of his. And I believe for MrBeast, you could win, I think the ultimate prize is $456,000. And I believe everyone left with some kind of prize, no matter who played. But if you're looking at who he's invited to play, it's essentially his fans who are just looking to have a good time, and not necessarily because they're in need of money. I don't know, that might not be the case for all of them, but that's what it seems like when you watch his Squid Games. I've seen parts of it, and it seems like everyone is just there to have a good time because they like him. So there's, you know, a difference in how we're choosing folks. Obviously, in the Netflix Squid Games, if you lose, you die. And that's not happening in MrBeast's. You just, you know, you lose, and then I think you get a consolation gift. I think someone said $2,000. And I think another thing to note here that is interesting is that Squid Games, the show, was done for the rich elite. Specifically, a handful of people were privy to the games, right? To the final scene specifically. I think we saw like 5 or 6 people watching it. With MrBeast's, he actually put out a tweet asking the society as a whole if they would want to see this. I think he said if his like TikTok or his tweet or his video or whatever got 17 million thumbs up, he would then go on to recreate the games. And it did. So I think there's a lot to unpack there around our society as a whole. And their thought process, because I would say that in this instance, this is more Hunger Games-esque than Squid Games, just because it's access to the public as a whole, right? I think it's 75 million views. People are literally wanting to watch this, and he's giving access to everyone. Whether or not you think that's good or bad, is it for you to decide, because that is what our society is leaning towards, right? That's why we liked, you know, Fear Factor. And I want to hear kind of your take on it below. I think it's also interesting that the director said that he wanted to depict something that depicts extreme competition. And in his instance, the extreme competition of life. And it's interesting that MrBeast did this in terms of YouTube, because if we're looking at YouTube in a larger sense, the competition out there is wild. It's extremely competitive. And so I think that kind of falls into something that he was talking about, the director, as well, because, you know, now it's like we have to do the next big thing to get to where we want to go, to be famous, to be online, to do any of that stuff. And in this case, it's like, what do, you know, to get there. And a lot of times you see people exploiting other people, or doing things that are questionable when you look at it in a larger context. And so I think that is something that kind of plays into this too, because this is content for MrBeast so that he can have a larger content as a whole. But what is that? It's because there's so much competition. That is something that he knows will bring him views. So there's that too, you know. It's just all interesting, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say below. I've been keeping an eye on the back and forth, and I've just been really intrigued. It's been so interesting how the people are so on one side and so on the other, and there's been no middle ground or no conversation around it where we could just have a dialogue to understand someone else's opinion. I feel like that's really hard in our society today, and so I wanted to just bring this to you, and I wanted to hear what you guys had to say about it. So comment below what you're thinking. Please play nice in the comments if you are going to comment, and go watch Squid Games on Netflix. And if you so want to also watch Squid Games for MrBeast, you can also do that as well and draw your own conclusion. All right, well, that's all I have. Wishing you the best. I will see you in the next one. I believe it's going to be our 12-foot ninja reaction video. So I will talk to you soon. Bye.